The Varanthi Interstellar Academy had stood for 3,000 years as the most respected military institution in the known galaxy. Every species that held power in the Galactic Concordance sent their best and brightest children to train within its ancient halls. The crystalline spires of the Academy reached toward the violet sky of Varanthi Prime, like fingers grasping at the stars themselves. Commander Thesik Varan moved through the corridors with the quiet confidence of someone who had spent 2 centuries shaping young minds into warriors. His body was composed of living crystal that shifted between shades of blue and silver, depending on his mood. Today, that crystal held a pale gray tone that reflected his uncertainty. He held a data tablet in his segmented fingers and read the file for perhaps the 100th time. The words had not changed since the first reading, but he kept hoping they might. Human, female, age 28 standard years, former sergeant in the United Nations Space Corps, selected for the Diplomatic Exchange Initiative. Thesik had trained cadets from over 60 different species during his long career. He had worked with the insectoid Morthians, who could survive in vacuum for short periods. He had instructed the gaseous Etherians, who existed as clouds of sentient energy. He had even once trained a Korvaxian, whose species communicated entirely through bioluminescent patterns. But he had never trained a human. The species was young by galactic standards. They had only achieved faster than light travel 5 centuries ago. Most senior members of the Concordance still viewed them as children playing at civilization. The decision to admit a human to the Academy had been controversial, and many saw it as nothing more than a political gesture, meant to appease the growing human colonies. Thesik entered the observation chamber above Calibration Room 7 and found he was not alone. Senior Academician Eulith stood at the viewing window with her compound eyes fixed on the chamber below. The Morthian neurobiologist had mandibles that clicked softly when she was thinking, and right now they were clicking rapidly. "You are here for the human as well?" Thesik asked. "I am here to observe an anomaly," Eulith replied without looking away from the window. "The preliminary medical scans on this species were most unusual. I wish to see how she performs." Thesik joined her at the window and looked down into the calibration chamber. It was a simple room with white walls and a single chair equipped with neural interface technology. Every new cadet underwent the threshold calibration on their first day. The test measured pain tolerance and stress response and fear thresholds. The data was essential for customizing each cadet's training program. The door to the chamber opened and the human walked in. Thesik studied her carefully. She was smaller than he had expected. Her skin was a warm brown color, and her dark hair was cut short in a practical style. She moved with an easy confidence that seemed out of place for someone entering such an intimidating environment. Most new cadets trembled when they saw the calibration chair. This one simply looked around the room with curious eyes, and then sat down without hesitation. A medical technician attached the neural electrodes to her temples and along her spine. The human watched the process with mild interest, as if she were observing something happen to someone else. When the technician finished, she gave a small nod and said something that made the technician pause. Thesik activated the audio feed. "Is this going to take long?" the human was asking. "I was hoping to get a look at the training facilities before evening meal." The technician did not respond. He simply finished his work and left the chamber. Thesik opened the communication channel to address the human directly. His voice echoed through the chamber speakers. "Cadet Vasquez, I am Commander Thesik Varan. I will be administering your threshold calibration today. The test will measure your neurological responses to various stimuli. Please signal verbally when you wish the test to stop. Do you understand these instructions?" The human looked up at the observation window. She could not see through the one-way glass, but her eyes found his position with unsettling accuracy. "Understood, Commander. Ready when you are. Desik initiated the calibration sequence. The neural interface hummed to life and began sending carefully measured signals directly into the human's nervous system. Level 1 was designed to create mild discomfort comparable to a minor headache. He watched the human's face for any reaction. She blinked once and then tilted her head slightly as if listening to a distant sound. Interesting, Eulith murmured beside him. Her neural activity shows she's receiving the stimulus, but her behavioral response is minimal. Desik increased to level 2. This level typically caused subjects to shift uncomfortably in their seats. Some species vocalize mild distress. The human sat perfectly still. 30 seconds passed. Then 60. "Commander," the human said through the audio feed. "Are we beginning now?" Desik felt his crystalline body flush with a deep purple color that indicated shock. He checked his instruments 3 times. The calibration equipment was functioning perfectly. The neural link was stable and transmitting at full strength. The human's nervous system was absolutely receiving the level 2 stimulus. "The test has been active for 90 seconds, Cadet Vasquez," he replied carefully. "You are currently experiencing level 2 pain stimulus." The human's eyebrows rose slightly. "Oh, I thought maybe there was a delay or something. It just feels like a little pressure behind my eyes. Like when you need to yawn, but cannot quite manage it." Eulith's mandibles stopped clicking. The Morthian turned to look at Desik with an expression he had never seen on her species before. It was fear. "Increase to level 3. She said quietly. Desik hesitated. Level 3 was significant. It caused most oxygen-breathing species to gasp or cry out. The Morthians themselves, who were known throughout the galaxy for their hardiness, only averaged a tolerance of level 4. But Eulith was the senior scientist present, and her word carried weight. He increased the stimulus. The human shifted slightly in her chair. She rolled her shoulders as if working out a minor stiffness. Then she settled back and waited. "That is a bit stronger," she reported. "Feels like the start of a tension headache. The kind you get after staring at screens too long." Desik looked at Eulith. Eulith looked at Desik. Neither of them spoke, but both of them were thinking the same thing. What exactly had the Concordance invited into their academy? And more importantly, what else did they not know about humans? Commander Desik stared at his console with growing disbelief. The readings made no sense. Every instrument confirmed that the neural interface was working exactly as designed. The human was receiving the full level 3 stimulus directly into her pain receptors. And she was sitting there as if waiting for a bus. "Increase to level 4, Eulith said. Her voice had taken on a strange quality that Desik had never heard before. It was the voice of a scientist who had just discovered that everything she knew about biology might be wrong. Desik moved the control forward. Level 4 was the threshold where most carbon-based life forms began to show serious distress. At this level, the Morthians themselves typically requested cessation. Only the most resilient species in the Concordance could tolerate level 4 for more than a few minutes. The human's jaw tightened slightly. Her fingers curled around the armrests of the calibration chair. These were the first physical signs of discomfort she had shown. "There we go," she said through the audio link. "Now I can actually feel something. Reminds me of the time I ran my first marathon. That deep ache in your muscles when you hit the wall around mile 20. She spoke as if she were describing a fond memory. Desik's crystal body had shifted to a deep violet that was nearly black. This color indicated profound confusion, bordering on existential crisis. In 200 years of service, he had never seen anything like this. "What is a marathon?" Eulith asked quietly. "I do not know," Desik admitted. "But I intend to find out." Other instructors had begun gathering at the observation window. Word had spread through the academy that something unusual was happening in Calibration Room 7. A Varanthi weapons master named Korath pressed his angular face against the glass. Behind him stood two Etherian observers whose gaseous forms swirled with agitated colors. "Is that the human?" Korath asked. "Why is she just sitting there?" "The display shows level 4. "She appears to be comfortable," Desik replied. "That is impossible." "And yet," Desik made a decision. He pushed the control to level 5. This was the threshold that separated the merely resilient from the truly extraordinary. Level 5 caused most species to scream. Some lost consciousness. A small percentage experienced permanent psychological trauma. The Academy medical staff kept emergency sedatives ready for any calibration that reached this point. Elena Vasquez took a deep breath. Her hands gripped the armrests hard enough that her knuckles turned pale. A thin layer of sweat appeared on her forehead, and her jaw muscles stood out like cables beneath her skin. But she did not scream. She laughed. It was not a laugh of madness or hysteria. It was the laugh of someone who had just been told a mildly amusing joke. The sound echoed through the chamber and into the observation room, where a dozen aliens stood in stunned silence. "Now we are getting somewhere," Elena said. Her voice was strained but steady. "This is like a really good workout. The kind where you know you are pushing your limits." Senior academician Eulith had moved to a nearby terminal and was pulling up data with frantic speed. Her forearms danced across the interface as she searched through xenobiological databases. When she found what she was looking for, her mandibles fell completely still. "Commander," she said slowly, "I need you to look at this." Desik stepped away from the calibration controls to examine her screen. It displayed the planetary classification data for the human homeworld, Earth. A small rocky planet orbiting an average yellow star in the Orion arm of the galaxy. The classification code made his crystal heart stutter. Class 12 gravity, well, oxygen atmosphere at 21% concentration. Extreme axial tilt, causing severe seasonal temperature variations. Active tectonic plates with regular seismic events. Predator-prey ecosystems across all biomes. Unfiltered solar radiation reaching the planetary surface. "This cannot be correct," Desik whispered. "These parameters describe a death world. No sentient species could evolve under such conditions." "And yet they did," Eulith replied. "The humans call their planet Earth. They have lived there for over 200,000 years. They did not just survive these conditions, Commander. They thrived. They became the dominant species on a world that should have killed them 1,000 times over." Desik looked back at the human in the calibration chamber. He saw her now with new eyes. This was not a soft creature from a gentle civilization. This was a predator from a world of predators. She had been forged in an environment so hostile that most species would consider it a natural death trap. "She is a death worlder," he said. "They all are," Eulith confirmed. "Every single human. Their entire species evolved on that nightmare of a planet. Pain is not new to them, Commander. Pain is their oldest companion." In the chamber below, Elena had noticed that the stimulus had not increased further. She looked up at the observation window with those strange soft eyes that somehow seemed more dangerous than any fangs or claws. "Is that all?" she asked. "I thought this test was supposed to find my limits." Korath made a sound that might have been a curse in his native language. The Etherians flickered with colors that indicated extreme alarm. Even Desik felt something he had not experienced in a very long time. He felt small. "Level 6, Eula said. "We need to see how far she can go." Desik returned to the controls. His hands trembled slightly as he pushed the stimulus to level 6. This was the maximum threshold for Varanthi. No member of his species had ever tolerated anything beyond this point. To do so would mean the human had a higher pain tolerance than the crystalline warriors who had built an empire across 1,000 star systems. Elena's entire body went rigid. The veins in her neck stood out against her skin. A small trickle of blood appeared at her nose where capillaries had burst under the strain. Her breathing became rapid and harsh, but her eyes stayed open, and her voice stayed steady. "Okay," she said between clenched teeth. "Now I understand why everyone makes such a big deal about this test." She smiled. It was the most terrifying thing Desic had ever seen. "On Earth, we have a saying, Commander. Pain is just weakness leaving the body. And I have a lot of weakness left to lose." The observation room had gone completely silent. Every alien present was beginning to understand something that would change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. Humans were not a young species to be pitied and protected. Humans were something else entirely. Something that even death worlds could not kill. The calibration chamber had never been pushed beyond level 7 in all the centuries of its operation. The equipment simply was not designed for such extremes. Those higher levels existed only as theoretical extrapolations based on data from species that had gone extinct long ago. Species from worlds so hostile that even the memory of them made xenobiologists shudder. Commander Desic stood at the controls with his crystal fingers hovering over the interface. Every instinct he had developed over 2 centuries of service told him to stop, to end the test and declare the human an exceptional specimen, to write his report and move on with his life. But something in Elena Vasquez's eyes made him push forward. She wanted to know her limits. And so did he. Level 7. The neural interface hummed with a frequency that made the observation window vibrate. Elena's body convulsed once and then locked into rigid stillness. Blood vessels burst in her eyes, leaving webs of crimson across the whites. Her fingernails dug into the armrests hard enough to leave marks in the reinforced material. A sound escaped her throat that was half scream and half growl. It was the sound of something primal, something that had survived ice ages and mass extinctions and countless predators that had tried to make humans their prey. Eulith was recording everything with trembling appendages. Her neural activity is beyond anything in our databases. The pain signals are overwhelming her sensory cortex, but something else is happening. Her brain is releasing massive quantities of unknown chemicals. What kind of chemicals? Desic demanded. I do not know. They appear to be natural painkillers produced by her own body. And something else. A compound that is increasing her heart rate and muscle response. Commander, her body is not just enduring the pain. It is actively fighting back against it. In the chamber, Elena had begun to breathe in a strange rhythmic pattern. Deep, slow breaths that seemed to push against the agony flooding her nervous system. Her hands unclenched from the armrests and she placed them flat on her thighs. Her eyes, which had been squeezed shut, slowly opened. She looked directly at the observation window. "Is that everything you have?" she asked. Her voice was rough and strained, but there was something in it that made Desic's crystal heart freeze. It was not defiance, exactly. It was more like disappointment. Korath stepped back from the window. "What is she?" "She is human," Eulith replied. "And I am beginning to understand what that means." The Morthian scientist pulled up a new data stream on her terminal. It showed evolutionary records from the human homeworld. Images of ancient creatures with massive teeth and terrible claws. Charts showing temperature variations that swung between deadly cold and lethal heat. Maps of a world where nearly every environment contained something that wanted to kill and eat you. The humans did not evolve as the dominant species on their world through strength or speed or natural weapons. Eulith explained. They won through endurance. They developed a hunting technique called persistence predation. They would chase prey animals for hours under their burning sun. They could not outrun their targets, but they did not need to. They simply kept following, never stopping, never giving up, until eventually their prey collapsed from exhaustion. She turned to face the other instructors. The humans evolved to suffer. Their bodies are designed to take damage and keep functioning, to push through pain that would kill other species. On Earth, the ability to endure was not a gift. It was the price of survival. Desik looked back at Elena. The human had closed her eyes again, but not in surrender. She seemed to be concentrating, focusing inward on some internal battle that the instruments could only partially detect. "There is more," Eulith continued. "Human history is filled with examples of this capability. They have members of their species who run races covering 100 miles through deserts. They climb frozen mountains for recreation. They fight in wars knowing they will be injured and do it anyway because they believe in something more important than their own comfort." She pulled up another image. It showed a human figure covered in wounds and burns, still standing, still fighting, still refusing to fall. They have a concept they call sacrifice, the willingness to suffer for others, for ideas, for things that have not even happened yet. It is central to their culture and their identity. They do not fear Pain Commander. They have learned to use it. The calibration equipment began to spark. Warning lights flashed across Desik's console. The neural interface was operating at the absolute edge of its design parameters. "Commander, we must stop," a technician called out. "The equipment will fail." Desik looked at Elena one more time. The human had opened her eyes again. Despite the agony flooding her body, she managed to find the observation window. She raised one hand from her lap and made a gesture that Desik did not recognize. It involved extending her thumb upward. Later, he would learn that this was a human signal meaning everything is okay. She was reassuring them. She was telling them not to worry. Desik terminated the test. The neural interface powered down, and Elena slumped in the chair. Her body was shaking, and her breath came in ragged gasps. But she was conscious. She was aware. And when the medical team rushed into the chamber, she waved them off with a weak laugh. "Just give me a minute," she said. "I have had worse hangovers." The observation room erupted in chaos. Instructors were shouting questions at each other and at Eulith. The Etherians had fled entirely, their gaseous forms too agitated to maintain coherence. Korath was demanding that someone explain what they had just witnessed. Only Desik remained still. He was thinking about the future, about what it would mean when the other humans arrived, about what it would mean for the Academy, for the Concordance, for the galaxy itself. The universe had just gotten a lot more interesting and significantly more dangerous. The Academy Council Chamber was the oldest structure on Varanthi Prime. Its walls were carved from a single piece of living crystal that had been grown over 5,000 years. The light that filtered through its faceted ceiling painted everything in shades of blue and gold. It was a place where the fate of empires had been decided. Today it would decide what to do about humans. High Chancellor Meridax sat at the head of the curved table. She was ancient, even by Varanthi standards. Her crystalline body had grown clouded with age, but her mind remained sharp as a blade. Around her sat the senior leaders of every department in the Academy. Military commanders and scientists and diplomats who had seen everything the galaxy had to offer. None of them had ever seen anything like Elena Vasquez. "The medical report," Meridax said. Her voice echoed through the chamber like wind chimes in a storm. "Tell me about the medical report." Senior Academician Eulith stepped forward with her data tablet clutched in her 4 hands. She had not slept since the calibration test. There had been too much data to analyze, too many assumptions to reconsider. High Chancellor the Human showed remarkable recovery. The burst blood vessels in her eyes began healing within 2 hours of the test's conclusion. Her stress hormones returned to baseline levels in under 6 hours. By evening, she was requesting permission to begin her regular training schedule. A murmur ran through the assembled leaders. "She wanted to train?" asked Admiral Vareth. His crystal body was scarred from decades of combat, and he had thought himself immune to surprise. After what she endured? She seemed almost eager, Ulith confirmed. When I asked her how she felt, she said she was experiencing something called a runner's high. Apparently, her body had released large quantities of pleasure chemicals in response to the stress. She described the sensation as euphoric. Chancellor Maradax leaned forward. "You are telling me that humans experience pleasure from pain?" "Not exactly, High Chancellor. They experience pleasure from overcoming pain. Their neurology rewards them for pushing through difficult experiences. It is an evolutionary adaptation that helped them survive on their hostile homeworld. The more they suffer, the better they feel afterward." The chamber fell silent as this information sank in. Commander Thesic had been standing at the edge of the room. Now he stepped forward to address the council. "High Chancellor, I have spent 2 centuries training cadets from across the Concordance. I believed I understood the limits of biological life. I was wrong." He activated a holographic display that showed Elena's neural readings compared to the Varanti average. During the calibration test, the human reached level 8 on our scale. For reference, the Varanti maximum is level 6. The Morthians, who we have always considered the most resilient oxygen breathers, averaged level 4. The human exceeded our entire framework for measuring pain tolerance. "And she did not break," Maradax said quietly. "No, High Chancellor. She did not break. She was stopped only because our equipment failed. When I asked her afterward if she had reached her limit, she said she was not certain. She said she had experienced worse during something called childbirth." Another murmur rippled through the council. Several members exchanged uncertain looks. "What is childbirth?" Admiral Voreth asked. Ulith pulled up biological data on her display. "It is how humans reproduce, Admiral. Their offspring develop inside the body of the female and are then expelled through an opening that is significantly smaller than the infant's head. The process takes many hours and involves extreme pain. Human females have been doing this for hundreds of thousands of years. They do it willingly. Some do it multiple times." The Admiral made a sound that might have been a curse or a prayer. It was hard to tell with Varanthi. Chancellor Maradax rose from her seat. Despite her age, she still commanded the room with effortless authority. "We have made a grave error in our assessment of humanity. We treated them as a young species in need of guidance. We offered them 1 seat at our academy as a gesture of political goodwill. We did not understand what we were dealing with." She turned to look out through the crystal walls at the academy grounds below. Somewhere out there, Elena Vasquez was already training, already proving herself, already exceeding every expectation. "The humans are not children playing at civilization," Maradax continued. "They are survivors of a world that should have destroyed them. They evolved not just to endure hardship, but to embrace it, to transform suffering into strength. This is not a species we should patronize. Then what should we do with them?" Thesic asked. Maradax turned back to face the council. In her ancient eyes, there was something that might have been respect, or fear, or both. "We learn from them. We study how they function. We discover what else they can do that we cannot. And most importantly, we make certain they remain our allies." She sat back down in her seat. "The diplomatic exchange program will be expanded. Instead of 1 human, we will request 20. Instead of treating them as guests, we will integrate them fully into our training programs. If they can teach us even a fraction of their resilience, it will be worth whatever political concessions we must make." Admiral Voreth nodded slowly. And what about the human who is already here? This Elena Vasquez? Maridax allowed herself the faintest smile. She has proven herself beyond any doubt. She will be given full cadet status immediately, and Commander Desic will personally oversee her training. Desic's crystal body flushed with surprise. Chancellor, I am honored, but I'm not certain I am qualified. I have never trained a Deathworlder before. None of us have, Maridax replied. That is precisely why you will do it. You witnessed her calibration. You saw what she can endure. You are the closest thing we have to an expert on human capabilities. She rose again, and the other council members rose with her. Today marks a turning point in the history of this academy. Perhaps in the history of the Concordance itself. The universe is full of dangers we have not yet encountered. Threats that will test us in ways we cannot imagine. And now we have allies who were born to be tested. Her voice rang through the crystal chamber. The humans have arrived. Let us make certain we are worthy of them. 6 months had transformed the Varanthi Interstellar Academy in ways that would have seemed impossible just 1 year before. The ancient halls that had once echoed only with crystalline Varanthi voices now rang with sounds from a dozen different species. And among those sounds was something that had become increasingly familiar. Human laughter. Elena Vasquez stood at the front of Training Hall 9 with 3 other humans flanking her position. They were the first wave of the expanded exchange program. Sergeant Marcus Chun, Lieutenant Ajia Okonkwo, Corporal David Reyes. Each of them had undergone the same calibration test that Elena had survived. Each of them had exceeded level 6. The academy had stopped being surprised. Before them stood the newest class of cadets. 200 beings from 40 different species. Varanthi and Morthian and Etherian and dozens more. They had all heard the stories about the humans. Some had dismissed those stories as exaggeration. They were about to learn otherwise. Welcome to endurance training, Elena said. Her voice carried easily across the vast hall. My name is Officer Candidate Vasquez. These are my colleagues. We have been asked to help prepare you for the challenges you will face as officers of the Galactic Concordance. She began to walk slowly along the front row of cadets. Her eyes moved across each face with careful attention. Some of you have heard about what happened during my calibration test. Let me be clear about something. I am not special. Any human could have done what I did. We are built different from most species, but that does not make us better. It just makes us useful in certain situations. She stopped in front of a young Varanthi cadet whose crystal body was flushed with nervous blue. What is your name? Cadet Desic Varan, the younger man. Elena smiled. She had met this cadet's father many times over the past months. The elder Desic had become something like a mentor to her. Your father tells me you have great potential. Do you know why you are here? To become a warrior, ma'am. Wrong! Elena's voice cracked like a whip. You are here to become something much more important than a warrior. You are here to become someone who can be relied upon when everything goes wrong. When the ship is burning and the enemy is advancing and every instinct in your body screams at you to run. She turned to address the entire assembly. The galaxy is full of dangers. Some of them are enemies that can be fought with weapons. Some of them are forces of nature that cannot be negotiated with. You cannot diplomacy your way out of a hull breach. You cannot negotiate with a supernova. Sometimes the only thing standing between your crew and oblivion is your willingness to suffer. Lieutenant Okonkwo stepped forward. Her dark skin gleamed under the training hall lights, and her voice was calm and steady. On Earth, we learned a simple truth very early in our evolution. The universe does not care about your comfort. It does not care about your feelings. It will test you and test you until you either break or become stronger. Corporal Reyes continued the thought. Our ancestors survived ice ages. They survived predators with claws longer than your arm. They survived plagues and famines and disasters that killed millions. And they did it by refusing to give up, by pushing through the pain, by choosing to endure when surrender would have been easier. Sergeant Chun moved to the center of the hall. Today, you begin learning how to do the same thing. Not because humans are superior, but because we have spent 200,000 years perfecting the art of suffering. We know every trick, every technique, every mental strategy for pushing through the wall that your body puts up when it wants you to stop. Elena nodded at her colleagues and then turned back to the cadets. The old calibration test has been retired. It was designed for species that had never encountered a death world. It could not measure what humans can endure, and it would never have been able to teach you how to endure the same. She gestured, and the lights in the hall dimmed. A holographic display appeared showing a new testing protocol. This is the human standard. It is not about pain tolerance, although that is part of it. It is about mental resilience, about finding that place inside yourself where surrender is not an option, about understanding that pain is not your enemy. Her voice softened but somehow became more intense. Pain is information. It tells you that something is wrong, but your body does not get to decide what to do with that information. Your mind does. And today you begin training your mind to use pain as a tool instead of a trap. The cadets stared at her with expressions ranging from fear to fascination. Many of them had never considered that their relationship with suffering could be changed. They had assumed that pain was simply something to be avoided. The humans were offering them a different path. 3 years later, the Concordance faced its greatest threat. The Harrow incursion was an invasion from beyond the galactic rim. The Harrow were creatures that had conquered civilizations across multiple galaxies using a terrifying weapon. They could project psychic pain directly into the minds of their enemies. Entire armies had collapsed before them. Entire species had surrendered rather than face that agony. When the Harrow reached Kepler Station, they expected another easy victory. They found something else entirely. The station's defense force was called First Threshold. It consisted of 100 soldiers from 40 different species. They were led by Commander Elena Vasquez. They had all trained using the human standard. They had all learned to transform suffering into strength. When the Harrow unleashed their pain weapon, the defenders did not flee. They did not surrender. They did not break. They advanced. The Harrow had never encountered anything like this. For 10,000 years, they had swept across the stars with their psychic agony. No species had ever pushed back. No enemy had ever smiled through the torture and kept fighting. Until now, the Battle of Kepler Station lasted 9 hours. When it was over, the Harrow invasion force had been destroyed. First Threshold had taken heavy casualties, but they had held the line. They had proven that the Harrow could be beaten. And across the galaxy, a new legend was born. The legend of the humans, the Death Worlders, the ones who had taught the galaxy how to suffer and how to win.